Let's talk about the pros and cons of each. So the first one, more traditionally, it's been done very, very successfully. There's still, right now it's a seller's market. As we're recording this, there are more buyers for practices than there are potential sellers. So we're seeing a little bit of boost in valuations because of that. But I think the ultimate flaw in selling an office traditionally, Aaron, this is my perspective. I don't think the valuation method has ever fairly recognized the value of that asset if you sell it to another dentist. It used to be that a practice, really rough guidelines here, guys, very rough, napkin, round figures. A practice was worth 80% of the average annual collections averaged over the last 3 years. That was what the model was for many years. That number's been increased now because of it being a bit of a seller's market. There's more buyers than there are sellers. And so that number today is about 90%. Now, there's a lot of variables. The quality of your equipment, the quality of your lease, the type of practice you have, your profitability, the team, your patient base, your insurance involvement. If you have a fee-for-service practice, it's going to be worth more than that. If you have a deep PPO practice, it's going to be worth less than that. But the ballpark figure is about 90%, Aaron. So if you take $1 million practice, and I'm just picking a round number to throw out there that makes the math easy. If you have that averaged $1 million in collections over the last 3 years, that practice is worth $900,000. And again, that doesn't include any real estate. That's just the assets that compose the practice. $900,000. Now, granted, $900,000 is not chump change. But is that really all your life's work is worth? Oh. You have to pay the broker 10%. 10% of 900, Darren?
$90,000.
So how much do you get? You don't get 900, you get 810.
Yeah.
You get 810. Well, if I didn't think 900 was fair, I don't think 810 is enough. Right? That's what you get. And just factor in the math. And sometimes the larger your practice gets, the lower the percentage is. Say you have a $3 million. What's the problem with selling a $3 million practice traditionally?
I mean, getting financing, right?
Yeah, the banks are afraid of that. I can do the math on that. $3 million. It's worth 90% of that, 270, less 270 to a broker, less than another 10% of that. What's my math on that, Aaron? It's worth what?
2.5-ish,
2.5-ish. Yeah. The number of dentists that can qualify for a loan like that are few and far between.
So it's almost like the bigger you get, you may have to kind of sell to a DSO. But I guess
you can follow any of the other strategies. You don't have to.
That's true. You could have the partners. You could keep running it. So it doesn't have to be this or that. It could be any one of the 4 strategies.
So I'm not saying that number one isn't the right choice. A lot of this depends on your goals, your objectives. Yeah. What's important to you? All of this has to be run through that filter.
Yeah. And I think DSOs typically are interested in the bigger practices, right? They don't really care about the $1 million practice.
Well, they're interested in usually a certain size. It's very, very loose here. Needs to be at least $1 million in collections and have at least 18% EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, 18% profit after paying the owner dentist their income as a dentist, at least 8. And that's where the smaller practices aren't going to get to that. They usually need to be a little bit larger than that to get to 18% profit.
Got it. So you're saying
that has more to do with that.
Right. Get it.
But I'm not saying the selling to a dentist is a bad plan. Right now, I have a number of clients that I'm coaching with on that. One of them is a really cool story. It's a story of a dental assistant that was in his practice that he encouraged to go to dental school. She went to dental school and she's graduated from dental school. And now she's in the practice as the associate doctor and she's going to be his successor.
Right.
So that could be a very good strategy in the right circumstances. And frankly, this is a case where he's done very well financially. He's got financial independence. Now, that doesn't mean that he's not concerned about getting the full value of his practice, but he's less inclined to need to squeeze every nickel out of it because he already has financial independence.
Right.
So again, circumstantially, that can be the right decision. What about door number 2? We did that at Life Smiles. And that can be a very good plan to sell part of your practice to another dentist as a partner, and then put the plan together to grow the practice and grow it. And let's say you sell half the practice. You used to own 100% of it. Now you own 50% of it. There's a situation where your 50% of the practice that was grown is worth more than it was as a solo practice at 100%. Now, if you don't believe that, just take a jump in faith with me, but that could be possible. And in that case, it could be a very good thing. What are some downsides to that? Dentists usually don't play very well in the sandbox with each other. Maren, did I just say that or was I thinking that?
Yeah, you're saying you got to be really careful in getting the right partner, right? Because
you
if
got to
you
spend
don't,
a whole lot of time in due diligence and make sure you've got the right partner.
right.
And spend a massive amount of time to determine that your fit is perfect, as it was with Dr. Tim at LifeSpouse. Absolute, everything matched. And we
Right.
spent plenty of time to evaluate that. Tim has been a fantastic addition. But that's not always the case. But if that's the case, that can be a really good strategy. You could take the proceeds of whatever, you sell a certain percent of it. You could take those proceeds and perhaps retire your debt. If you have some debt,
Right.
maybe you could retire debt. And how good would that feel to have no debt? That can feel very good. So that second option is one worth considering.
Yeah, especially if you're feeling burnt out and you find the right partner. This way you can just share the load, take some money off the table, retire some debt, and maybe just
maybe
enjoy
there's some things
the next
clinically that
phase.
you're not interested in,
Yeah.
but there are patients in your practice that would, like, maybe you're not interested in placing implants. Maybe you're not interested in adult orthodontics. Find someone that matches up with your philosophy, and all of a sudden you have untapped potential to grow. So that can be a very good strategy, and you don't have to sell 50%.
Right.
We've got a question in the Q&A segment where I'll get into more detail about what percent, but that can be structured any way that you want it. And that can be a very good strategy, especially if you love what you do, but maybe you'd like to have a little less management burden around it, share the load, especially around HR and those kind of things. That could be a very good strategy. Third option, sell to a DSO. Now you're going to want to really do your due diligence on that because, like we said earlier, there's some good ones, there's some okay ones, there's some ones we should run away from. Find the good one. There are good ones. I personally think some criteria that you should have when you look at the good ones is how much clinical interference do they have? Once they bought your practice,
Right.
are they going to require you to use a different lab, use a different technology, use different supplies, different materials? I personally think the best DSOs don't interfere that way. Why would they buy you if they didn't think you had something worth buying? Let you do what you do clinically. You should
and
be.
the other catch that I noticed from practice owners who sell to DSOs, there's this golden handcuff: 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and
Well, they'll
usually,
require, every DSO has a requirement for you to stay a certain period of time. Generally, it's 3 to 5 years. So if the idea of continuing to stay in the practice as a dentist for three to 5 years is not in your game plan, then check that off. That's not a option to
Right.
go. Another one is what's the character of the leadership team at the DSO? Are these people that you'd like to work with? Are these partners? You're partnering with them.
Right.
Are they partners that you want to partner with, or are they just bean counters?
Right.
And that's something that I think is very important. And you can determine that. You have the right to determine that. You can determine. There are DSOs that have great leadership teams that are completely aligned with patient-centric practices that are all about helping you achieve your full potential, as a dentist. The advantage to selling to a DSO, it's often worth much more in the eyes of the DSO than it's worth, say, the traditional valuation method of 90% of your average collections. And that's simply because they get a great rate of return. Where else can they park their money and get 20% a year, 22%, 24%, 25% a year? Some of the best DSOs get a 20% earnings and 25% earnings. 28%. Where else can they park their money and get 28%? So they value your practice more. You could get 3, 4, 5 times the value of your practice compared to the traditional model. So that might be the way to get the most value of your practice. Again, assuming there's a fit other ways. And then finally, continuing to own the practice. That usually has a very narrow set of circumstances where that's appealing to you. In some cases, it's forced, Naren, a dentist that has become disabled and not able to do dentistry anymore, but they still want to, own their practice. That's been an option there. But it could also be an option assuming no disability and assuming something you just want to own. I mean, think about it, Naren. If you sold your practice for 90% of the average annual collections, typically all you have to do is run your practice another 3 years and you've made that money in your practice
Yeah,
and you still own the asset. You
exactly.
still own the asset. So that could be a very favorable option in the right circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, like, even like compared to DSO, like if you own the practice, you can own it and collect the money, right? That's one of the reasons why, like, because otherwise you're going to be working for the DSO for 3 to 5
Well,
years. So yeah,
and you could
same
choose
thing.
to sell. Well, if you're the owner not working as a dentist, it's going to be a very narrow DSO that buys that.
Right.
Because they want you to continue to work because they're nervous about
The revenue.
they're
Yeah.
nervous about patient continuity.
Right.
However, if you've run it for a period of time, you might get them to make you an exception because you've proven that you can run it without you being on the handpiece. You've proven that you could run that. So it's not, but frankly, you could sell it later for whatever it's worth,
Yeah, and you've
traditionally or
collected the
otherwise,
profit for like 10 years. So
and you
you
got the
may,
profits plus that. So
yeah, exactly.
it's probably the least popular option,
Hmm.
but it is an option.